In this video, we're going to talk about 3 easy steps that you can use to make sure you avoid getting a relapse in your back pain if you're getting into exercise, getting into working out as a way of avoiding back pain for the long term. Chances are you've already been caught out doing this in the past, getting caught out, becoming unstuck, starting training again only to be caught with a relapse. And we really want to help with this video you avoid that happening at all. Before we get into number 1, let's just paint a picture for you to make sure you understand why the injury is happening in the first place and why it's such a common pitfall. Now, when your back is painful, in the most cases, it's because there's an excess inflammation in that region that's actually causing the lingering symptoms. Let me show you on the spine. The problem in the spine is that there's a confined amount of space. So quite often you injure some of these minor structures in and around the lower back. Maybe it's not a severe injury. Maybe it's a minor tear to the disc or a minor strain to some of the ligaments or other soft tissues. And we get a little bit of a flare up that gives us a sciatica or whatever it may be. But the early parts of that pain coming down is just the inflammation in a lot of cases easing and the pressure in this region from excess swelling dissipating. That's where you start to feel better and you go out and do those activities. Now, if we take a moment to compare this to, say, a broken leg. The reason that you wear a cast if you've broken your leg is not for any reason other than to stop you from doing things you shouldn't do. The pain has gone many times well before the cast comes off, but the process of healing is not the dissipation of pain. There are plenty of conditions, and you can probably think of a few, that involve very little pain but can be seriously bad for our general health, well-being, and even life-threatening in some cases, and there's no pain whatsoever. There's a real problem when it comes to back pain of just thinking about the pain. My back hurts, my back doesn't hurt, now I can do whatever I want. And the problem is the remodeling process, the healing process hasn't taken place. And that's why that cast stays on for a little bit longer. So those bony parts can start to realign themselves along stress lines to rebuild that strength and integrity. And all too often when we go along the lines of back pain and we start getting back into those activities, we haven't been through that healing process. We see this time and time again in people in our Back in Shape program or people in the free part. They go on and go back up to these other activities, be it running in phase 1 or other bits and pieces, and they just re-injure themselves because the pain's gone down, so problem's gone away, when actually the healing needs to take place. So really remember that as we get into these 3 tips. And remember, at any point you can click the link somewhere up here to get involved with the Back in Shape program. We know we've got guys all over the world, in the US, over in India, in Singapore, that join the program, and you too can get involved as well on the website at backinshapeprogram.com. Let's get on to the rest of the video. Tip number 1 is working your core properly. This doesn't mean, as time and time again people are doing, we go and do endless sit-ups, leg raises, crunches, Russian twists, and these activities. We want to learn to stabilize that spine. Remember, there's going to still be some healing taking place in that lower back and that remodeling. So we want to support the spine in a neutral position. We never really need to force forward bending. The process or the thought process that doing endless sit-ups is somehow going to protect your back. Most of the time we injure our back when we're going down and coming back up. We don't need to practice this movement here. It's just completely unnecessary. We need to practice engaging that core properly so it can provide stability to the spine, because you haven't ever really injured your back when it was stably held. You injure it when you move inappropriately and the spine gets compromised. So learning to hold that stability as your spine is moving around is a really important part to providing protection for that spine, rather than the only way you engage your core is when you bend down. That's a problem, and it leads to recurring injuries, particularly when we're talking about disc problems. So if we take number 2, remember, these spines that we saw in point number 1, the spinal vertebrae, there's a lot of them. They're not particularly well stabilized unless we engage our core and hold them nice and steady. The next step in number 2 is to integrate that strong core with other muscles. That might be lunges, it might be squats, it might be other exercises that involve us moving this spine around in an asymmetrical way to mimic those activities on a daily basis that catch us. Maybe it's putting a child in a car seat, maybe it's carrying the shopping bag on one side. It's the ability to maintain that spine strong in the face of being pulled in different directions. And that's where we start integrating those larger whole body movements whilst maintaining a stable, strong core. Note, there's no leg raises and no sit-ups and no Russian twists here. Still, we're integrating that core with the rest of our body to work in a seamless way. For a lot of movements, we need a strong midsection, and that includes the spinal muscles on the back to act as an anchor for those limb muscles to work off and do the doing. The final point Now we've got strength, we've got control, we've got an ability to prevent future injury and an ability to provide stability while this process is going through a nice healing situation in this lower back. We can think about a little bit of flexibility. Note, we did not put flexibility at number 1. This is 3 steps, not 3 random bits that you can do as and when you want. There's order to this, and that's how we build lasting results. This last one is going to be hip flexibility. And this is starting to build that hip flexibility so we've got a little bit more range of motion in those hips so we can go through certain ranges of motion, getting up and down off the floor, doing things, getting out of chairs, all these sorts of activities. And the hip socket can take that strain because it's a very strong joint in many ranges. Those muscles have to work harder in different ranges as we go through that hip range of motion, but having the hips do all the heavy lifting can mean that the back maintains a nice strong position, a nice engaged position, so we don't start getting asymmetrical load through the sacroiliacs or issues there as well. We've got a strong, stable structure here to load bear, and we've got nice mobile hips with supporting strong musculature in the legs to allow us to increase our ranges of motion and further decrease the propensity to develop lower back issues for the long term. So that's our 3 steps. Let's go through them in order. Number 1. We want to be doing engagements of the core that provide stability, that practice and enable us to hold everything stable and still in the face of movements in the future. And then number 2, we have the ability to integrate that core with larger muscle groups such as the glutes and the leg muscles or the powerful upper back muscles as well, to enable stability in the face of being pulled in different directions even more so, and start to develop more practical strength. And then point number 3 is to build in a little bit more flexibility, particularly in the hips, so that we can go through greater ranges of motion, decrease the likelihood of repetitive strain on the lower lumbar spine, L4-5 and L5-S1 in particular. And those 3 things together, we can then work on enhancing those principles through the long term to make sure that we get the longest and most lasting back pain relief, or just bulletproofing that lower back, or as we like to say, keeping it back in shape for good. Now ultimately you can take these principles, you can apply them to whatever you're doing right now. Maybe you're doing a specific program for yourself and you can apply these to that program, or maybe just use it as an evaluation tool. Are you adhering to these principles in your specific program or exercise protocols? If you're not sure, then you've got the Back in Shape program. That's where we take you through phase 1, 2, 3 and 4 to build these principles as you go through. Many of you watching this are probably a little bit beyond phase 1. You'd come in at phase 2 and start some of those basic exercises that emulate step number 1. And in step number 2 and 3, we're going to really push on more so in step 3 the principles that we discussed in step 2, and then as we get through phase 3 we're going to start integrating a little bit of flexibility. It's a step-by-step, just follow the program and you'll hit all of those targets as you go through the program. It'll be great for you. There'll probably be a link just above here or in the description, or you can go to backinshapeprogram.com to learn more about it and really start getting your back in shape in the right way so that you don't get plagued by back pain for the long term. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune into some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.